The caterpillar took the hookah out of its mouth and addressed her in a languid, sleepy voice. "Who are you?" said the caterpillar. That was not an encouraging opening for a conversation. Alice replied rather slyly, I hardly know, sir. Just the present. At least I knew who I was when I got up this morning, but I think I must have changed several times since then." "What do you mean by that?" said the caterpillar sternly. "Explain yourself." "I can't explain myself, I'm afraid, sir," said Alice, "because I'm not myself. You see." "I don't see," said the caterpillar. "I'm afraid I can't put it more clearly," Alice replied very politely, "for I can't understand it myself to begin with. And so, being so different ways every day is so confusing." "It isn't," said the caterpillar. "Well, perhaps you haven't found it yet," said Alice. "But when you have to turn to the crystals, you will someday. You'll know. Then after that, you'll turn into a butterfly. I should think you'll feel like a little queer, won't you?" "Not a bit," said the caterpillar. "Well, perhaps your feeling may be different," said Alice. "All I know is it would be very queer to me." "You," said the caterpillar contemptuously. "Who are you?" Which brings them back to the beginning of the conversation. Alice felt a little irritated at the caterpillar making such very short remarks. She drew herself up, said very gravely, "I think you ought to tell me who you are first." "Why?" said the caterpillar. Here was another puzzling question, and as Alice could not think of any good reason, as the caterpillar seemed to be very unpleasant state of mind, she turned away. "Come back," the caterpillar called after her. "I have something important to say." This sounded promising, certainly. Alice turned, came back again. "Keep your temper," said the caterpillar. "Is that all?" Alice said, swallowing down her anger as she could. "No," said the caterpillar. Alice thought she might as well wait, as she had nothing else to do. Perhaps, after all, it might tell her something worth hearing. For some minutes it puffed away without speaking, but at last it unfolded its arms, took the hookah out of its mouth again, and said, "So you think you're changed, do you?" "I'm afraid I am, sir," said Alice. "I can't remember things as I used, and I don't keep the same size for 10 minutes together." "Can't remember what things?" said the caterpillar. "Well, I've tried to say how it taught the little busy bee, but it all came different." Alice replied in a very melancholy voice, "Repeat." "You are old, Father William," said the caterpillar. Alice folded her hands and began. "You are old, Father William," the young man said, "and your hair has become very white, and yet you insistently stand on your head. Do you think, at your age, is this right?" "In my youth," Father Williamson replied to his son, "I feared I might injure the brain, but now I'm perfectly sure I have none. Why, I do it again and again." "You are old," said the youth, "as I mentioned before, and you have grown most uncommonly fat, yet you turned a black somersault in the door. Pray, what is the reason of that?" "In my youth," said the sage as he shook his grey locks, "I kept all my limbs very supple by the use of this ointment and shilling at the box. Allow me to sell you a couple." "You are old," said the youth, "and your jaws are too weak for anything tougher than sway. Yet you finished the goose with the bones and the beak. Pray, how did you manage to do it?" "In my youth," said his father, "I took to the law and argued each case with my wife, and the muscular strength which it gave in my jaw has lasted the rest of my life." "You are old," said the youth. "One would hardly suppose that your eye was as steady as ever, yet you balanced an eel on the end of your nose. What made you so awfully clever?" "I have answered 3 questions, and that is enough," said his father. "Don't give yourself airs. Do you think I can listen all day to such stuff? Be off, or I'll kick you down the stairs." "That is not said right," said the caterpillar. "Not quite right, I'm afraid," said Alice timidly. "Some of the words have gotten altered. It was wrong from the beginning to the end." From the caterpillar, decidedly, there was silence from then on for the minutes. The caterpillar was first to speak. "What size do you want to be?" it asked. "Oh, I'm not a particular size, Alice hastily replied. Only one doesn't like changes so often, you know. I don't know, said the caterpillar. Alice said nothing. She had never been so contradicted in her life before, and she felt that she was losing her temper. Are you content now, said the caterpillar. Well, I should like to be a little larger, sir, if you wouldn't mind, said Alice. 3 inches is such a wretched height to be. It is very good height indeed, said the caterpillar angrily, rearing itself upright as it spoke. It was exactly 3 inches high. But I'm not used to it, pleaded poor Alice in piteous tone, and she thought to herself, I wish the creatures wouldn't be so easily offended. You'll get used to it in time, said the caterpillar, and it put the hookah to its mouth and began smoking again. This time, Alice waited patiently until it chose to speak again. In a minute or two, the caterpillar took a hookah out of its mouth, yawned once or twice, shook itself, and then it got down off the mushroom and crawled away from the grass, merely remarking as it went, One side will make you grow taller and the other side will make you grow shorter. One side of what? The other side of what? Alice thought to herself. Of the mushroom, the caterpillar said, just as if she had asked aloud, and in another moment it was out of sight. Alice remained looking thoughtfully in the mushroom for a minute, trying to make out what were of these two sides of it. As if it was perfectly round, she found it was a very difficult question. However, at last she stretched her arms round as far as they could go and broke it off a bit to the edge with each hand. And now, which was which, she said to herself, and nibbled a little bit, the right hand bit, trying to get the effect. The next moment she felt a violent blow underneath her chin. It had struck her foot. She was a good deal frightened by the very sudden change, but it felt that there was no time to be lost. She was very shrinking rapidly, so she set to work, and once she had ate some of the other bit, her chin was pressed so tightly against her foot there was hardly room for her to move her mouth, but she did at last and managed to swallow the morsel of the left-hand bit. Come, my head's free at last, said Alice in a tone of delight, which changed into alarms in another moment. When she found that her shoulders were nowhere to be found, she could see, when she looked down, was an immense length of the neck, which seemed to rise like a stalk out of the sea of green leaves that lay far below her. What can all this green stuff be, Alice said, and where have the shoulders got to? And oh, my poor hands, how is it? I can't see you. She was moving them about as she spoke. No result seemed to follow except a little shaking among the distant green leaves. As there seemed to be no chance of her getting her hands up to her head, she tried to get her head down to them, and she was delighted to find that her neck would bend about as easily in any direction like a serpent. She had succeeded in curving down to the graceful zigzag. She was going to dive in among the leaves, which she had found to be knuckling into top of the leaves under her, which she had been wandering. When the sharp hiss made her draw back in a hurry, a large pigeon had flown into her face and was beating her violently with its wings. Serpent, screamed the pigeon. I'm not a serpent, said Alice indignantly. Leave me alone. Serpent, I say again, repeated the pigeon, but in more subdued tone. It added a kind of sob. I've tried every way and nothing seems to suit them. I haven't the least idea of what you're talking about, said Alice. I've tried the roots of the trees, I've tried the banks, I've tried hedges, the pigeon went on, without attending to her, but those serpents, there are no pleasing them. Alice was more puzzled, but she thought that there was no use in saying anything until the pigeon had finished. As if it wasn't trouble enough hatching the eggs, said the pigeon, but I must be on the lookout for serpents night and day. Why, I haven't had a wink of sleep in the last 3 weeks. I'm very sorry you've been annoyed, said Alice, who was beginning to see its meaning. And just as it had taken the high tree in the wood, continued the pigeon, raised its voice to a shriek, and just as I was thinking I should be free as one of them at last, they must needs come wriggling down to the sky. Serpent. But I'm not a serpent, I tell you, said Alice. Well, what are you, said the pigeon. I can see we are trying to invent something. I'm a little girl, said Alice. rather doubtfully as she remembered the number of changes she had gone through that day. A likely story indeed, said the pigeon on a tone of the deepest contempt. I've seen good many little girls in my time, but never one with such a neck as that. No, you're a serpent, and there's no use in denying it. I suppose you're telling me the next that you've never tasted an egg. I have tasted eggs, certainly, said Alice, who was a very truthful child, but little eggs eat quite as much as the serpents do, you know. I don't believe it, said the pigeon, but if they do, then what kind of serpent? That's all I can say. That was such a new idea, said Alice, but this is quite silent for a minute or two, which gave the pigeon the opportunity of adding, You're looking for eggs. I know that well enough. And what does it matter whether you're a little girl or a serpent? It matters to me a big deal, said Alice hastily. But I'm not looking for eggs as it happens, and if I was, I shouldn't want yours. I don't like them raw. Well, then be off then, said the pigeon in a sulky tone as it settled down against the nest. Alice crouched down among the trees as well as she could, for her neck kept getting entangled amongst the branches. Every now and then she had to stop and untwist it. After a while she remembered that she had held the pieces of mushrooms in her hands. She set to work carefully, nibbling at one of them and then the other, growing sometimes taller and sometimes shorter until she succeeded in bringing herself down to a usual height. It was so long since she had been anything near the right size that it felt quite strange at first, but then she got used to it after a few minutes and began talking to herself as usual. Come on, there's half of my plan done now. How puzzling all of these changes are. I'm never sure what I'm going to be from one minute to the other. However, I've got it on my right size. My next thing is to get into the beautiful garden. How is that supposed to be done, I wonder? As she said this, she came suddenly upon a place where a little house, and it about 4 feet high. Whoever lives there, thought Alice, I'll never do come upon this size. Why? I should frighten them out of their wits. So she began nibbling at the right-hand bit again, and did not venture to go near the house till she had brought herself down to 9 inches high. That's the end of chapter 5.